Welcome to, I don't even know what number this is, but this
I don't
is...
either because it's hot outside.
It's hot as Satan's dick. Okay.
Whoa. That's just out there.
Welcome to our Lost Sanity film podcast.
Yeah.
And today we are answering your questions. Thank you so much for
About
commenting.
Satan's genitalia, apparently.
No, that's already answered. We're answering your questions regarding our film festival and film festivals in general.
Yes.
So we do realize that this is a very big subject matter and there is a lot that goes into it. So today we are going to talk about specifically why you should submit and how to use festivals to your benefit. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense, especially in this heat.
Right. And we'll try to keep it short. We don't want to give you, 50-minute podcast every time. That can be a lot, but...
We both like to talk, but we promise we'll get to the nuts and bolts of it today.
Who's nuts? Satan's nuts? Sorry,
These
guys.
nuts. You can tell it's hot out.
It is really hot. But welcome to spring, summer, whatever. Okay. So in terms of obviously we have an international film festival that is catered to really all genres.
Yeah.
But I would say our most pervasive is horror. Horror, definitely.
It's definitely the highest percentage-wise of submissions we get. I mean, we started off exclusively just doing horror, and then we kind of branched out with our second year, accepting all genres. But still, even in that, we saw a dramatic spike in horror submissions.
Right.
So it's by far the most prevailing genre in terms of popularity and submissions.
Right. And the whole reason for doing this podcast are for the people that submit to our festival who write us all the time asking questions. So this is a great opportunity for us to do, a whole subject matter dedicated to film festivals. So in the wake of this morning, we talked about this in length, and there was 3 things that really stood out to me regarding film festivals.
Lay it on them.
So the first is, let me think. Okay, so the first is distribution, like having a distribution plan. The second is, using film festivals as a way to market yourself. And really, I mean, the first 2 are kind of one and the same, but we'll go into detail about these 2 strategies. And the third is brand. So, we want to specifically talk about, why you should submit to festivals. And the first 2 are regarding this.
Right.
There's 2 methods of madness. And usually it's broken down into feature film length, documentaries and films versus short films. So the first 2 options and reasons why you should submit to film festivals is 1, if you are trying to get distribution. Now, it's not a great distribution plan to just say, I'm going to make my film and then I'm going to have 0 budget and I'm just going to submit to a bunch of festivals.
And someone's just going to pick it up magically.
Right. And that,
And the ones that would do that are not the distribution companies you would probably want to go with anyway.
Right. And I mean, sometimes it does work, but we've seen it, so varied, and we just want to say that we don't want to tell you don't do that, but we want to give you another option to that whole game plan. So there are certain companies, for instance, Gravitas Ventures, right? They're distributors, and so they go to film festivals with the notion that, okay, these guys have already done the work for us. They've already selected which films are amazing, and we get to watch them and then possibly give them offers, right? So
and not to lose your thought, keep that thought in your head, but that's a very important thing you just mentioned, because a lot of distribution companies, they want to cut the time. Like, they don't have the time, even if they want to watch all of these films, or manpower, staffing. So to go to a festival like that saves them so much work that, of course, they're going to do that.
Right.
So it's not that there's a lack of enthusiasm on their part, but still it's about, like with our festival, we got a lot of scripts because we opened it up to unproduced scripts, and it takes time to read through those. I mean, we just made it, you know what I mean, in time for the deadline. So
Like the night before up until 12 o'clock.
Right. Yeah. So, and not to get off subject, but when you do see, a fee for that, when you're submitting for your script, there's a reason, because they're using a lot of time and energy getting through your work.
Right.
As enjoyable as it is, it takes a lot of work, a lot of footwork, a lot of time, a lot of energy.
Right. So there is validity in submitting your features or even your short films to the bigger, film festivals, because they have such a large audience and they have these relationships with distributors. It does offer you an opportunity to be seen in that way. However, that does not mean that, you get into Sundance or even Tribeca or some of the larger festivals. It doesn't guarantee you distribution. And that's something that we want to say, just in case that's your game plan. We want to offer you an alternative solution so that, if that by chance doesn't work out for you, you're not absolutely devastated. And if that does work out for you, great. You just shot ahead of the competition and made a really wonderful film. Congratulations. And that does happen. And there are Oscar contenders, out there. These are the larger festivals that you can submit to. But there's also a reason that when you're submitting to festivals, you shouldn't only submit to the larger festivals. Because if you don't get in, and basically festivals, we know, being on the other side of the table, they select for many different reasons. And the
so many variables.
Right. And us being a small venue, we get to, for instance, if we really love a film, we will bring it into our festival, and if it's so amazing, we could make up basically an award for someone who's really deserving.
For sure. If we're blown away by something, honestly, it's the bigger fish in a smaller pond strategy, and it can work magnificently for some of these independent films.
Right, but in terms of the bigger festivals, they can't do that. So let's just say you made this amazing sci-fi film, and there's 2 sci-fi films, and you submit to Sundance. They can only take one. It might be a gamble, and someone might know someone at Sundance. You don't know that, and you shouldn't be left devastated that your amazing film didn't make it to Sundance, when you can just as easily get distribution from other festivals and smaller festivals.
Yeah, and save money in the process.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we don't
hate.
Right, there is that. There's a huge price difference between the smaller festivals, ourselves included, and the larger festivals.
For sure.
We're talking like over the scope of, you submitting to all of your festivals. This could be hundreds or thousands of dollars.
Oh, easily.
So keep that in mind. Keep it in mind to be very specific. We'll go into who to submit to in the third one, but let's go to the second one. So that's the first option, submitting your short or feature-length film to larger festivals with the possibility of distribution. That's also the very, very tiniest of percentages that actually are able to go along that route. Here's an alternative, and here's a very successful alternative. This is strategy number 2. So this can be for features and for short films. And this is what we really pride ourselves in doing. Now, we have been contacted by distributors, and we do show access to producers, executive producers, film agents, distributors. We are your agents. Like, we are agents in the sense of supporting you and, really vouching for you as filmmakers. And some smaller or mid-level festivals can do the same. And that's an awesome opportunity, because maybe a distributor approaches us and they say, hey, do you have any Christmas or, Christian films by chance? I don't know why they would approach us and ask that, but let's just say that they did. We can actually recommend someone.
You are wearing a nun outfit right now.
That's
so that
true.
Could be the Christian.
Talking about Satan's dick. So, but you guys understand what we mean. So there are still opportunities to be seen and to establish distribution in that way. But even more predominantly, when you submit to festivals, if you win an award, that gives you clout. That's probably the most important of everything, maybe even more than distribution, is the clout of being accepted and even awarded something in a film festival, because then once you have, built that up for yourself, you can just as easily, probably even more easily than the first route, approach film agents, approach film aggregates approach distributors and say, hey, we won the Lost Sanity Film Festival as, you know, the best horror film, and it's a feature length, which can get distribution. Some short films can, but more predominantly, you know, feature length films. And then you approach them and they say, great, send us your stuff.
Right. It essentially brings you to the dance. It piques their curiosity enough to allow your work to be screened, and that's everything. You know?
It allows it to be screened. Yeah. I mean,
like by them,
exactly. Because again, they don't.
I mean, it could wind up in a screening, but you know.
Well, yeah, we do, you know, film festivals do screenings, right. But specifically what we're talking about here is, you know, just like the first case scenario of distributors going to film festivals because the film festivals have done the hard work of finding the good films, you know, just having, you know, Lost Sanity Film Festival or whatever, like horror or comedy or whatever, being a winner or being accepted to a film festival says something to distributors. It says that this is a good film, so they're more willing to watch it because you've won awards.
Right.
The more the merrier. You know, if you have like, oh, we've been to 100 different festivals from Bohunk Nowhere, that's different, and we'll talk about that, you know, in terms of the third thing that we want to talk about, which is branding. But definitely, this is a great opportunity for all filmmakers to really get seen, and you may not be seen by a distributor watching a screening of your film at a film festival, but it doesn't matter. You just want them to see it so that they can offer you distribution, especially if you have a feature-length film that's ready to sell. If you have a short film, it's still important because you can still show them being distributors or sales agents or film agents or film aggregates or investors.
Right. I mean, and to touch upon something you just said, I mean, there's a good chance they're not going to be attending these festivals. So if you get the award that goes along with the festival and submit it, it's going to go a long way. Those laurels mean a lot, especially the more you collect, depending on which ones, it can open the door for you. So, I mean, again, we're going to touch upon which ones specifically in the next category, but it's very important.
Yes, and so like we said, we're gonna fly by on this podcast. So the third, and we'll kind of think of everything at the end and make sure we covered all the bases.
Right.
But the third area that's very important is branding.
Yes.
And so there, you know, we actually see this a lot, and it's great that there's film festivals all over the world. But if you have, for instance, if we, you know, have a horror film that we've produced and it gets into, you know, women's, you know, film and TV film festival, that's great. But if I approach a film aggregate and say, I have this horror film, you know, it was in the women's film and TV film festival, they're
it's not
like
necessarily going to move the needle in the type of you know, area you want it to go.
Right.
And not that it's not a great thing to be recognized, but again, it's like, who are you? What is your brand? What are you trying to say? You know, your identity in this industry is very important, and where you want to go. Right. So you want the right doors opening for you in terms of the content you want to present. Right.
And honestly, it does matter because, for instance, if I really want to sell myself as a director and I directed it and then I get honored by Women TV and Film, that's an amazing thing, and that's something that I can put in my resume. On my resume, excuse me. So it's not a bad thing, but if you're trying to specifically get distribution or get this specific film seen by certain people, you want it to be on brand. You want film festivals that represent your message and what you're doing so that you're, you know, whoever's going to see it is really going to understand what your film means and what it's doing in the arena of filmmaking.
Right. Absolutely.
So what's another example of that?
Like, I would say, you know, like if you're trying to attract the attention of, let's say, a Lionsgate, who love to support and give certain deals to independent horror filmmakers, that you're going to want to, for instance, like the New York Horror Festival. That's something you're going to want to target, because if you win any award at like the New York Horror Festival, they're going to take notice, and they're probably going to watch your film at the very least, which is a huge deal. And if they're even moderately impressed with your film, even the first 20 minutes of your film that's won this award, you may end up with a deal.
Right. Yeah, you really have to be specific about what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have to know that from the beginning of making your film. You have to have a distribution model, at least visualize that for yourself. And at least for us with our first documentary, we knew exactly where we wanted it. We didn't have any expectations beyond that. We ended up getting beyond that, but it was completely on brand.
Absolutely.
It was, you know,
like which companies to target, which would fit in with their family, their catalog. Totally. And it worked out quite well for us.
Like, literally, it was like film
everything
done.
Now is gravy. Like, we got all the ones we wanted, and it's literally like, oh, wow, these are nice bonuses that we're now getting.
What it basically came down to was like, oh, actually, we can, like, do more than that. But I think, you know, as independent filmmakers, you know, if you're, of course, it's different. If you're a director that works for different companies and different production companies and studios and Netflix and whatever, that's very different than being an independent filmmaker, which is like, this is your baby, you know? And you have to get it in the right hands. So,
I mean, I would say look at it as like, look at the cover art to your film. You want to encapsulate everything that your film represents in this one picture to grab attention and declare who you are and what this film is. Think of it the same way when you're submitting to festivals.
Right.
The exact same mentality.
Yeah, like if you were submitting to festival, and you should do it in different tiers, because I've seen this happen too, when people have not had the funds or haven't put some money aside, and they go into post-production and they submit to festivals, and they only submit to the top festivals, and they don't get any awards.
Yeah.
And then they're stuck with the reality of, okay, so now our films weren't screened at the big festivals.
Budget's gone.
Budget's gone, and you have to wait another year for new festivals.
And your esteem is injured dramatically at that point. Like, oh my God, I didn't get into Cannes. I
wasted a year of my life.
I didn't get into Tribeca. Well, guess what? Most don't.
Yeah, no one gives a shit.
Right, exactly.
Like, don't let Tribeca and all of them dictate when you can get an art festival and contact anyone, like literally, but just make sure it's on brand. Because if you're like, oh my gosh, first of all, like, can you imagine how confusing it would be if you had a title of a film that didn't indicate, for instance, horror, and then you submit it and you're like, well, I got into the Crocodile Festival, and they're like, what does that mean? Like, that doesn't mean a lot for distributors.
Yeah, like I did I had a horror short that I submitted into some festivals when I was just kind of starting out, and one of my horror shorts got into something like the Diwali Festival of Lights, you know, extravaganza. And that certainly didn't move the needle for the horror genre that I was going for. And where I was very honored to be recognized, that having that on my resume did not in any way move the needle for my horror piece that I wanted.
I mean, I've done like indie-wise Best Actress, and now I'm not like pursuing acting. But like down the line, I could say, oh yeah, I won a Best Acting award if I was ever interested in acting again, and you know, that might tell someone, oh, she can actually act. So you know, like if that's your intention
what is your goal?
Yeah, it depends what you're trying to do as a filmmaker. What type of clout are you looking for? And so again, the first distribution plan about just sending it to a festival and hopefully it gets picked up for distribution or you get investors out of it, that's a smaller, much smaller percentage than the other two routes, which are building clout so that you can contact people directly and get them to watch your film and hopefully pick it up. Or the third route of, you know, really establishing awards for yourself as a director, as a cinematographer, as an actor, whatever that may be.
And try not to go broke in the process of submitting.
Right.
You know, stay within your budget. And on a personal note, I would say, quite honestly, target the smaller festivals, the ones who will really watch and appreciate your work, and that will lead to the bigger dogs down the line. You know, I firmly believe that. Kind of target the quality smaller festivals first.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I guess those are the three things that I never understood about film festivals. And I also think it's important, how much do festivals care about the filmmakers? Because some of them just don't, you know, and sometimes they're location based, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if I were to, for instance, submit to a festival based in Florida, it might be because I live in Florida and I'm trying to build contacts there.
Right.
So just be aware of that as well. Like it's not like, what is the intention behind sending, you know, your films to festivals? That will help you to eliminate a lot of festivals that you might not necessarily need to submit to or need to even get an award from.
Right.
And just make sure it's on brand. That's what's most important.
Completely. And, you know, again, not to toot our own horn, but I can honestly say at the Lost Sanity Festival, we watch each submission we get. We watch it thoroughly. And whether it ends up getting accepted or not, there's always a reason for it, but at least you'll have the comfort of knowing it's been watched. Some of these bigger festivals, they watch about the first 30 seconds and they make up their mind. And that's what you're dealing with the bigger dogs. So I'm just like, on that note, just kind of have a plan, stick to your message, and, you know, come submit to these smaller festivals, quite honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that there's benefit to all of the different levels of festivals, but if you only submit to the like big name festivals, that's really putting yourself in a tight box, and it makes it a lot more difficult for you. So I would say at the very least, give yourself the best shot you can give yourself. And we will talk more about, you know, what our festival is like behind the scenes, what our voting process looks like, but we'll do that in another podcast. And continue to ask us questions, give suggestions about information that you want to know, and we're happy to give it to you all.
We sure are on this extremely hot day. I need some water, but
all right, guys, have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good one, guys.